it. This is Roland. This isn't, I mean, these guys have been around since the beginning of this whole thing, and they know
how
how
this
to do it
works.
right. They know how to do it right. It's amazing how much money they can make recycling, arguably fairly, recycling old products into like new versions of the same old product. Don't get me wrong, they're amazing, but like you can take these old ideas, repackage them for today and make money off of them. So
even that is still very frustrating at times, though.
And I don't own any of the remakes. I get why they're appealing to people. I get the whole sort of history, and I understand all these ideas, but like they know what they need to do hardware wise.
Well, you had a System 8.
Done it. I did. The System 8 was dope.
Yeah, the System 8. I mean, the biggest piece of that is the plug out, right?
Yeah.
And the plug out is literally being able to plug into it a Juno or a Jupiter. Right. And the funny thing of that is they still haven't finished releasing plug outs for it.
It's just half done.
Yeah. Okay, so here, it's totally half done. They haven't continued to release plug outs, and now if you don't have all the plug out slots filled, you don't have very many user banks. So you actually don't have enough patch memory to go, to like 200 patches if you really wanted to start saving lots of patches. And over time, you're going to do that with the synth. You're going to actually start using all that stuff up. And they, for whatever reason, they assign the number of patches you can have to the plug outs. And they're like, but don't worry, they're all coming. Here's the first 2. And then silence. They didn't announce anything at NAMM. All they did was they announced that they're adding a few things. They're adding, like you said, they're adding like I think the 808 to their Roland Cloud, which is like a subscription-based service for VST Roland gear. And then you, after a year, can keep one of them. But the plug out format still isn't even available for System 8. It's like they just continue to half-ass everything they do. On the other hand, they still like happen to like stumble ass backwards into amazing shit. They're the weirdest company, and they're the most frustrating company out there right now.
I mean, like, what about the little $500 MX1? That thing is brilliant. If you don't get one with the bad knob, and I'm sure they fix the knob quietly like everybody else fixes things, but it's fantastic.
Which knob was that, by the way? Because mine are all good.
It's the one on the far left that you have to go into menu mode to change configurations.
Yeah.
It's the one in the far left center, the bigger one. I don't have one anymore, but over there in the left. And you only use it when you're changing settings on the machine, like with out of player mode. So you hardly ever use it. But to me, I discovered that when you want to go change your settings, the knob didn't work. And I had 2 of them that failed. But that's
all I ever do that is to change configuration settings. I barely touch it otherwise.
Well, yeah,
everything else, you can actually, just by hitting aux, you can turn the channel knob, which also does the filter if you're not holding it down, and that actually manipulates it instead of having to rely on just the one knob for everything.
Yeah, cool. And I thought like the best parts of the Era line for me were the fact that the synthesizer could plug into the MX1 and plug into my Serato set, and then it was all in sync, and I could play some chords, which I thought the synth sounded great. I mean, I liked it. You could play some chords, hit the lock button or key hold or whatever, and then you could go sidechain compress it with the MX1 and suddenly hit the master button, and all of a sudden your like sort of pieces of a song sounded cohesive and cool, and you're like, holy cow, I could add this 808 drum machine on top, and then it sounds like music. And then you add Serato, and it gets fidgety. Like, okay, shit. Okay, shit.
That master button is by the way a stroke of genius. Because if you're doing a live PA or Dallas Jam as we're calling it these days, you bring out a bunch of gear, you bring out a mixer, you hand off your stereo pair to either the DJ whose mixer you're plugging into or whoever's running sound, and that's it. You're running raw signal to it. You're not mastering it. Every DJ is going to play tracks that have been mastered.
Right.
So what this does, you're not going to bring out a rack. It's not like you're going to pack like a rack with Avalon and a limiter and like an EQ. No way. This actually does it, and the presets are actually really good.
It works.
It has 10 presets, and they're magical.
It works well enough that we've just kind of set up shop like completely ad hoc sets with a Tractor S4, maybe an F1, and the MX1, and it sounds great. Like you couldn't really even tell going back and forth between the two. I mean, it was it's nice.
Yeah, I think of all the Era products I've tried and sold and written about, I think the MX1 is the one piece that's still on the radar just because it does so many things. It's an Ableton control surface. It's an Ableton audio interface. And at least, I think maybe by next year, the next iteration of Push will have a built-in sound card. But until then, it hits two check marks for me because you get eight faders to control your channels in Push, which lets me use the knobs on Push for other things instead of mix mode, right? So you can get kind of hands-on with that. and you can mix a couple of analog sources in there. And you can hit the master mode, and boom, there you go.
See, the thing is, I found that was a little bit fidgety. So the problem that I run into integrating it with Ableton is that when you actually take the channels on it, I'm like looking over there because that's where mine is. So let's say you take channel 1, you can assign channel 1 in Ableton to a channel in Ableton. And then what it's doing is it's routing the audio out of Ableton to it, and then you can use the effects on it. And then you can use its faders to adjust the volume. You're not using those faders as a controller. You're literally making the adjustment on the MX1 and then sending the modified signal back into Ableton. So that's a kind of a unique way of doing it because it's just an in-out, basically. It's like an older format of doing things. If you remember the way people used to do recording studios was they would run a digital mixer, and then the digital mixer would run into like an ADAT. And so the digital mixer, you'd have like the computer into the digital mixer. You'd run the mix into the ADAT, which would catch the recording. It's like that, only Ableton's doing both the ADAT and the computer portion of things, and then it's acting as the mixer. You can also run it as a control surface, but it doesn't have flying faders, so as a mixing control surface, it's not perfect. And then, honestly, I'm getting just as much utility off of my Novation Launch Key 61 here. It works a little bit faster, a little bit better. That uses the push API, so you don't ever have to like assign anything yourself or build up your own templates. And it like I said, it just works. So it's a little bit finicky there. And I also found it has enough latency that it's not that worth doing. And the lack of mic inputs, I'd rather just use my Focusrite, honestly. And I tried mixing the two. I could probably deal with the latency, but when you mix the two into something like ASIO for All, the latency becomes not worth even trying to deal with.
Okay, so you've definitely spent more time on the MX1 with Ableton than I, because I pretty much used it as an Era controller, or as an Era brain, and then I thought, oh, look, you can also use it for Ableton.
Yeah, you know what I'm actually doing with it is, so I have all my synths right here, and my synth rigs, when I want to grab a synth into Ableton, I actually have a stereo pair running from the out into the Focusrite, even though I could just get rid of the Focusrite as the interface and use the MX1 in Ableton, because the Focusrite is mapped to my monitors, it's mapped to my microphones, it's my main heart of my actual recording rig, so I'm just using it as a stereo pair to get them in, and it's basically just a summing mixer. Yeah,
your little sum mixer, and it's cool because you still get all those effects, which you know, I mean, I feel like for live performance with Ableton, if you know something like the APC 40, the little Mark II, if they had a sound card built in, that would almost be, you know, a better complement for a strictly Ableton, you know, session coming into my DJ rig. But as of now, you'd have to have another piece of equipment to run your audio. So, you know, everything is just, there's all these options, and they're so close. They're so close. Like,
here's where we're actually hitting right now. These days, if you want to do a full-on Dulles jam, this is the golden era. There's better analog synths you can use, as long as you're not trying to, you know, slave the MPC. There's multiple ways to do your central piece and have it be the heart to drive everything. There's obviously with MX1, other people use more traditional sum mixers, but MX1 takes it and it's like, okay, you used to be a DJ, so here you could do Q mixing, mutes, and then here's a bunch of performance effects that you can really use to mangle your shit, and a mastering button. Awesome. So you could do that. The only problem is, and I guess they would probably view this as a good thing, is it has 4 dedicated channels that only work with Era. And so I have 3 channels that are sitting empty, and because of that, I was like, okay, you know what, I'm going to get the TB03. I wanted the TB03 anyway. I love 303s, so I picked that up. But now I'm like sitting here thinking, man,
you got more channels.
You got 3 more channels.
Yeah,
so
now
I'm
you're
like,
looking at the System 8.
Yeah, I'm like, well, what I'm actually looking at is I'm looking at like the Jupiter Boutique.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. And those plug in Era as well?
Yeah, those plug in Era.
Cool.
They had to put an update on the MX1, but now those will work as well.
Cool.
So and it's like, wow, I guess, I mean, that's like the point of locking them down, is to drive sales to themselves.
It's working.
It just kind of sucks.
Get your TB03 and something else. In my case, I'll take the D05 and I'll make some Enya. Let's do this.
Oh yeah, Enya, by the way, Renico Flow, it's my jam.
Yep. Nice. I need a joystick on my synth.
Yeah, anybody says that Renico Flow is not the bomb is literally just lying to themselves, insecure, something like that. I can get down
all this Enya talk's getting me sweaty. I gotta take my hoodie off. I'll be right back. All right, There we
So
go. Cool.
I think next. Sorry to switch gears, but I need to hit this really quick while I'm thinking of it. So having taken apart the MPC Live, I realized something that was very smart by in music, but it also worries me a little bit. So I've had a couple of weird little quirks with my MPC Live. One of them was that if I hit pad 13 at just the right angle, Dan actually found this one for me. The MPC Live would promptly reboot.
So there's a short in there?
There was some kind of a short. Now I did manage to fix it, but I know that the control, like the brains of that unit, is a development board. I'm not sure exactly which processor it's using, but it's using some dual core ARM processor. The operating system and the core sample library is actually sitting on a 16 gig super cheap micro SD card internally.
Oh.
So you can only swap that out if it breaks or something. I can understand now why people were having issues like, I wrote all my projects to the internal memory and now my thing doesn't boot. I get it. Yeah, it's a real cheap piece of crap that was probably about 20 cents.
Yeah, you probably used up all the IOPS on it, yeah.
Yeah, so, but regardless, what I noticed is there was a similar sticker sitting on the Denon SC5000s, and I went, whoa, wait a minute.
The MCS,
yeah. And so I took a look at it and dove kind of into some other forums and found that, yeah, in fact, it's using the exact same board, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it still worries me a little bit, because that means that whole thing is running on essentially a dual-core cell phone, which, if it works right, is awesome. Because that opens up a lot of doors, but things like the MIDI clock make me a little worried.
Yeah, and
Denon and Akai are owned by the same company.
Yeah, it's all in music, which is also the owner of Rain, which apparently Rain used to be Rain USA, and all their stuff was made here, and now this Rain. So the pending, not to diverge too much, the Rain 72 that's coming out in March will be their first new mixer in a long time. That's not made in America, and it's under the InMusic umbrella. So it's a very kind of, it's either going to make or break that brand. But
it's like they're trying to compete with Uli.
Well, and
race
it's funny,
to the bottom, boys.
I know, and it's sad because this new 72 mixer and these Rain 12s look super cool, and I kind of want them. Not because they can do everything that my 4-channel set can do, but because they're just cool.
Can we pit stop on the Rain 12s really quick?
Yeah, you want to back up. Yes.
Why didn't they make them a little bit more flexible so that they could in fact be used in a standard mix configuration, being that they're basically effing square?
Oh, you mean instead of in battle mode?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question, because they're only
almost
the
perfect
market.
Yeah, they're almost perfect. Like, you wanted a digital turntable, like, and you don't want to use a Denon SC3700. Like, this is it. This is the turntable.
Yeah, I mean, I have a Techniques turntable, the one that Dan and I met over. Well, we already knew each other, but
we knew each other for a while.
Yeah, I'm touching it. It's right here. But
those used to be in my apartment. Those used to be my weird brick box in Kansas.
It's totally true, and they're still alive, and they're great, but one of them has a bad ground. Both of them need new tone arms. I just bought new needles, and I was like, why are they scratching or skipping? And I did the tone arm test, and both of them failed. So here I am sitting on these beautiful decks that need like $400 worth of crap, and then Rain says, hey, here's a digital turntable that's just like your Techniques, but with no tone arm, no needle, no scratching. Oh, and here's a really cool brick of a mixer that has all these cool effects. But we're not going to give you 4 channels because that would be too much. But, at the same time, it has like the USB hub in the back, so you can plug in both of your decks. It has 2 USBs for audio, which makes me wonder if there's some flexibility with Ableton or whatever, aside from just their advertised, 2 DJs can plug in and switch sets, which is the same thing Pioneer's advertising with their dual interface, which makes me worry that one of them or both of them have locked it down so it's proprietary, so you can't just use the interface. But I digress. That kit looks rad, but it's not out yet. It's in music. They deny sometimes that they have problems with their products when people like me discover the problems.
MC8000, or I'm sorry, MX 8000.
The Serato Pro's not out yet, so who knows how that's going to go. We're going to be in live beta for months, so it's a big gamble. And so was the SD5000, which is where this sort of. So I was trying to do this whole standalone rig, and I figured, well, I'll just get my analog gear so my DJ rig can be on a computer and everything else can be standalone. I spent lots of money, played around with lots of gear, and then a friend of mine posted a 2-minute video to Facebook of him mixing like dirty, nasty drum and bass in his grimy little basement, right, which is badass. Maybe it wasn't a grimy basement, but the video footage was grainy, so it had this like grimy feel. And he had one player, and an old 2-channel mixer, and he was getting down on one player, and I was like, what the hell is this? And then he hits the one of the 4 performance, or one of the 8 performance modes. It was like the roll feature. He hits roll and he holds down the pad. And it's like da, 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 da. And I'm just like, what the hell did that guy just do? You know? And so I start doing my research, and that was like a whole other wormhole.
But this is how gear acquisition syndrome happens.
I am so infected with the SC5000 bug,
okay.
Because
so here's
so like you said, it's got the performance pads for cues and for rolls and for slicing and everything else that you can do, like in Serato generally.
The controller.
It's right on there though on the actual player. You've got 2 layers, so it's also like a 4-channel controller for the most part, but it's standalone, and the screen is big enough and dense enough, and I know the operating system that it's running, and it would be perfectly fine for library management and whatnot. It kind of checks all the boxes for me.
Done a couple of weddings on the Denons just to see if I could manage like 88,000 iTunes songs, you know, and like find requests from, you know, Lionel Richie and whatever. And I had the first build, software build, when I did the first big wedding, and it was glitchy. Like I would search Michael Jackson and it wouldn't necessarily find all the tracks. But then after that first software firmware update they came out with, suddenly, you know, I can type in Backstreet or whatever, and every single stupid song by those guys will show up in the browser. It's an iPad mini screen, basically.
Oh, damn, you're really doing it for the money.
Right. Well, that's the whole thing. Like, I really don't enjoy the weddings or the private parties where they want to hear top 40, but they give me money, and that gives me gear. And damn it.
Yep.
You know, it's like it's a forced 6 hours of practicing my controller, and then I can go home and I have the muscle memory. So it's worth it. But anyway, they so far have not failed me. I've played a couple of like 4-hour shows at clubs and stuff, like top 40-ish stuff. And one time of the 4 or 5 times that I've taken them out of the house, and out of the 35 or 50 times I've played with them at home for hours, one time, one player kind of had like a flashy light warning thing, and it shut down for no reason. And I rebooted it and it was fine. And I can't isolate the cause, but it was one time out of, you know, hundreds of hours of use.
What's the boot time like on those?
It just takes a few seconds. I mean, okay. I push the button and it's like, you know, I could probably count to 5 or 10 and it's ready to rock. It asks me what my source is and I select it. Now I've got a couple of things that Denon, they're aware of, they haven't yet addressed. One of my players on the back, the USB plugs for your hard drive, one of them doesn't initialize my 7200 RPM hard drive on boot up like it's supposed to. So sometimes you have to unplug the drive from the extension cable and plug it back in. So the hard drive will just sit there until I do that, which is, it's minor, but it's there. Other things, if you're triggering the hotkey button, like kind of stepping your beat, waiting to kind of drop it in, sometimes if you do that enough, it'll kind of play one extra kick. So if you're like 4, 3, 2, 1, and you do it too fast, it'll actually drop the beat one more time, kind of throwing everything off. I found that it's easy to work around that. I just stopped doing this 5 times. The other one is a tiny complaint is if you, on most controllers, if you hit play and loop at the same time, or a hot cue and loop at the same time, it'll start that cue point and start the loop on that mark. And on the SC5000, when you hit both, it's like it can't read both at the same time. So the loop starts a half a beat late, but when it loops, it's still quantized and it still sounds perfect, but you can see on the screen that it's ever so slightly off. But otherwise, you literally get twice the channels of a Pioneer Nexus, and the damn thing is twice as creative.
Yeah, and luckily, me personally, and I know this won't be true for everybody out there, but me personally, I skipped the entire CDJ kind of revolution. I just stayed on turntables and I switched over to DVS and then just went to a controller immediately after that. So I never got in the habit of the whole like queuing ad nauseum thing. And I see people doing it and I'm like, I get why you're doing it. It makes sense. But it I don't know, something about the switch over to digital, it just kind of, everything is so predictable and everything is so kind of consistent that you hit play, you nudge, you go, and that's it.
Right,
so
exactly.
I don't think that would be much of an issue for me, but that's really delightful to hear. I'm excited.
Yeah, I mean, I've been able to kind of eviscerate most products in a way that I decide they're not worth my money. But these I can't. Like I just, they're fantastic.
That's great.
The wheels are very responsive. The weight's good. You can adjust the tension. You can adjust the slowdown speed when you hit stop or when you hit play to stop the track. For example, you can tell it how long to wind down, which is pretty cool.
Do they have one knob for start stop, or do they have a start and a stop?
No, there's one button for start stop.
No, as far as the speed up slow down time.
Oh, it's just one knob, and the
Okay,
start
cool.
is automatic. It just starts. There's no speed adjust for the start. It's only the stop time.
Good, because
So
I got the Denon SC2900s, and I like that they have the dual controls, one for the startup speed, one for the stopping speed, but that often screws me when I'm kind of frenetic and in the thing, and I want to go, oh, I want to do like a, slow down the record really quick, and I hit it, oh, wait, no, that's the start, that stop, damn it.
Right. And that's where I've noticed a lot of guys are doing, like, they'll mash cue points to make like a stutter phrase, and then they'll hit stop and kind of get that
Yep.
and start again. And like, you can only adjust the one, so you can't mess it up. And it's instant start. And I'm actually, just today, I actually changed the settings. So when you hit a cue point, the track starts. Previously, I wanted to get a cue point selected and not have the track play. But I'm starting to appreciate the ability to just kind of mash. And anyway, so whatever. I've researched the Nexus players ad nauseum. And every Pioneer piece that I've purchased in the past year of like gear syndrome has been solid. It's worked perfectly. The AS1 Dave Smith kind of compilation thing is wicked. The SP16, it's limited, but it's badass and it's fun and it works and it sounds great. The DJS, like if you want a standalone sampler to go alongside your CDJs, there's nothing better, flat out period. It's badass. But the price of a Nexus single layer player, I just can't, I don't even understand it. Like, and there's no, it's like over $2,000 for the nice
yeah, I
one.
think they're $2,400 a piece for the 2000 Nexus.
And if you look at a picture of them, and if you look at a picture, the cue point pads are up on the top left, out of reach. There's 4 of them with a bank button, which is just nonsense. And they don't have any performance. So their philosophy is put it all in the mixer. So the Nexus 2000 mixer, that's actually what's shipping to my door this week. That thing is wicked looking. I haven't tested it yet.
You got rid of the Denon mixer.
The effects on the Denon mixer are garbage. I'm sorry, they're just crap. So sorry let's do that. Let's talk about the
mixer. No, that's what we're doing here.
The pros of the mixer are simply that your 4 decks get plugged into the mixer via Ethernet. So here's the cool thing: you can run 2 players via digital coax cables into your mixer. So you only have 4 little cables, and you run your green Ethernet cables into the mixer. So what that gives you, the Denon ecosystem. Each one of your 4 decks has a different color on the circle of the platter, and that color corresponds to their channel on the mixer. So for me, it was, orange, blue, green, red, right? So when you're looking at a player and it has a color, a red ring on the big platter, the mixer has a red highlighter kind of mark on the mixer just below the Q button or just above it. So you can keep track of your 4 channels. It also has an active deck status. So if this channel fader is at 0, the light on the player goes blank. It's just a white ring. And as soon as you twist the fader up a little bit, it turns colors. So you can tell if your decks are being played actively or if they're silenced.
Nice. Good visual feedback.
That's pretty cool.
Prevent some mistakes.
If you're not used to working on a 4-deck system, it's probably a lifesaver. I kind of followed your buddy here. I went from, turntables to the first version of Final Scratch to all the way down to like just tractor controllers. So for me, I'm used to playing on an S8. I don't need the help, but it's cool. It's super cool. I could see the benefit. It also, the Engine Prime Connect protocol allows the mixer to hear the tempo from the players digitally over some sort of communication LAN protocol. So everything stays in time with the players as far as the effects go. Here's the problem. If you're mixing mixed audio signals, if you have a turntable with like some vocals from an obscure speech, for example, that you might want to play over your set, the mixer has an inability to determine the tempo of that record correctly. So it just assigns a value, like say 74. It does this automatically. So when you're playing like a 120 BPM session on 3 decks and you flip to phono on deck 4 and you bring in that turntable and you hit a delay effect on that record, suddenly it's delaying at 74, not 120. And the only way to fix this is to hold down a button and twist the tempo knob to assign the proper value, which you can both see. You've just wasted your opportunity to drop in that sample because you're still twisting the tempo knob while your mix is now requiring your attention, right? So in the manual on page 11, it says you can do a special button combination and you can automatically, with whatever deck you have selected at 120, you can push 2 buttons and it will lock the tempo of all of the channels to that defined number. Doesn't work. Oh. I've talked to them on the phone. I've emailed them. It doesn't work. So they said the workaround is to disable Engine Prime's communication protocol and go into each channel and manually twist the value you want and leave it there, which is cool. If you're not playing mixed genre music for 6 hours, that's fine. If you're only mixing techno at 120, that's fine. Not to mention the fact that some of their effects just sound like shit, if I'm being honest. The gate effect, when you hit gate and you twist the knob, it's always off tempo. It's off the beat mark. It's some of their like the
It's ridiculous.
There's some like arguments on the forum because some of their effects need to be post fader versus pre fader and vice versa, and they're just
should be able to change it.
Yeah, you should, and you can't. And they're configured. And here's the bottom line: I can play a 7-hour set, and at the end of the 7 hours, I realize 100% that I barely touched any of the effects on the mixer. Therefore, what's the point of having a $1,900 mixer? Because I don't care what color my channels are. I know what decks wear, you know? And it doesn't have, like, for example, I have a little Pioneer RMX 1000 that I bought just to test the situation out because it was worth the test. And the Pioneer on just auto detect mode could figure out the tempo. And then I could just disable the auto detection feature. And whatever number was on the display just stayed there. It's a $700 effects module, but that effects technology is in every one of their mixers.
Yeah, it's got it's had that heritage since the EFX 500. Like I remember I've owned an EFX 500. That was my go-to for the longest time, even when it was just 2 turntables and a crappy Gemini mixer. You'd have an EFX 500 because it worked. It was 100% solid. You never really had to deal with dialing in a BPM. You just let it run with RCA sticking into it with analog audio, and it would do a perfectly legitimate job. And this is one of my concerns lately with newer products. The X1800, I'm very sad to hear that. But when we roll it back a moment, let's just talk about Serato. How is it that in 2018 Serato can't figure out a downbeat or a BPM correctly?
Oh, you know what? I told Dan, I said, look, I have 30 gigabytes of Tractor stripes in my library, and Tractor, I think, does a pretty decent job.
A+.
I've had Final Scratch all the way up to now to Tractor, and I have 30 gigs of information that Serato can't seem to access, and it can't seem to copy. It can't seem to figure out how to make the same data happen. And that was the biggest problem with the Roland 808 Serato experience was I have 87,000 songs in this library. I know that's excessive, but whatever, that's my style.
Yeah, if you had 5 of them, it still wasn't doing it.
Right, 87,000 songs. You can't figure out the tempo. So every song I play, that fader is useless because it doesn't even know how fast the damn thing's going.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, at this point, I'm you may have seen me. I'm Coherence on the Serato forums, and I've just straight up said, like, hey, Serato, why don't you talk to Native Instruments and license their technology? Like, I'm sure they'll give you a good deal, because this has been figured out already. Like, this isn't, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Just do what everyone else is doing, because they've all figured it out. Rekordbox and Native Instruments, and even going to things like Mixed in Key, and like all of these people have figured this out already. This isn't hard.
Right. Well, and let's talk about that too. So
real DJs don't need to use that.
That's not the point.
Here's the thing, though. If the computer doesn't know how fast the song is playing, when you move the fader 3 beats, it's not 3 beats. That's a problem, right? So let alone the sync feature. That's a whole separate topic we won't get into necessarily. But let's talk about the cool thing about your Roland is that if the tempo grid is off, you can actually use that wheel to adjust the grid. The SC5000, it doesn't exactly do that. Now, it will analyze songs in standalone mode that haven't been processed by Engine Prime, which is a step above what Pioneer can offer, or anybody else for that matter. So I can plug a thumb drive in and you can load your songs and it will analyze them right now. If it doesn't get the tempo right, you can't exactly like drag the grid like you can on the Roland. What you can do is you can move the grid over to hit the downbeat, but it's not that easy to adjust it on the player. Okay. In Engine Prime, even, you can't just do this with the grid, and I kind of wish you could. But it does a better job, but what you have to do is kind of tap tempo until you get it, and then you can drag the grid. But it's a little funky, but arguably, like, they made a really wicked player, and they're new to the DJ software thing, I guess, or they're just not that good at it. So it's a little funky, but it's arguably a data management system, and that's it. So I give it, if you use a solid state hard drive and you have a fast hard drive running the system and you have a fast hard drive you're dumping files to, it's actually pretty good. And it does a pretty good job of getting the tempo right. You just have to, on the player, move the grid over to the drop beat sometimes, but it takes 2 seconds to hold a button, spin the wheel, tap the button, and then you're ready to go.
That was really my only, I wouldn't even call it a complaint, but my only little niggle that I had with Tractor. Occasionally, one in every 150 tracks or so, it would inaccurately detect the downbeat. The BPM was still spot on, but the downbeat was just off by a little bit or off by 1 beat or something. And yes, it was actually a little bit more of a pain than it should be in Tractor to adjust that, but it's not hard.
They got it right so many other times that it wasn't a huge deal.
It was a rare instance, and when it did happen, it was funny. I actually learned the little nuances, and you probably have too, with adjusting the downbeat markers in Tractor, where you go and you move it, and then if you actually insert one kind of in front of one that already exists, it thinks like, I need to switch this to like double time, and it'll put a whole bunch of markers in there, and you're like, no, that's not what I meant. And sometimes it'll even do that with cue markers. Like you'll put a cue marker kind of outside of the actual grid at the start of the song, and it's like, I don't know what that means. I'm going to put twice as many markers in.
Right.
You're like, Control Z.
Well, and to be fair, if the S8 were re-released with like actual jog reels and pitch faders, I probably would still be on Tractor because I had no other complaints. The effects are perfect. They're always locked in time. They're quantized. For me, they were always right. I never thought, wow, that gate effect sounds like crap, or hey, this isn't right. It just always worked. The only problem was
the effects in Tractor are dope.
Yeah, the only problem I ever had was that I was trying to force Tractor and Machine to work together, which I now understand was never going to happen because then I just is not interested. And
for no reasons.
And I really, really, really needed that time code controller, some way to change the pitch. And I got tired of plugging in, 20-year-old turntables to a 4-foot wide controller. It's like as long as I am, and just to be able to use truncated DVS technology. It just pissed me off, and I refused to spend $3,000 on CDJs to plug into a controller, especially because I never owned a CDJ in my life. I never wanted a CDJ. So that was the whole issue with that. They just don't have something like the DDJ 1000, which by all accounts, if you don't mind using your computer and you don't mind Rekordbox, and I don't know, I've never used Rekordbox, that thing, if I was going to buy one controller for 4 channels, it'd be super hard not to buy it, especially after owning this DJS 1000, and I know that it's the same bloodline, it's the same hardware, it's the same faceplate, same buttons. Shit, dude. That thing looks wicked.
I really hope Native Instruments is taking notes. Because that DDJ 1000, it's like the perfect. It has everything you need and nothing you don't. It doesn't have as many features as some controllers, but you know what? It has all the ones that you actually need to throw down a rambunctious set with accuracy.
And all the effects and the mixer effects are in the mixer, not on the software.
Yeah.
I think they're taking notes. Did anybody catch their keynote? So
no.
Their keynote about sounds.
Well, it was partially about sounds, but then he moved on and talked more in the abstract about music and their vision for it and the ecosystem that they wanted to build. And what he had to say was that they don't think of it as like the track is really the end product anymore. What they really want to do is they want to influence creators and listeners to have more of that back and forth immediacy. So it's not a track that's the end product, but rather the track evolves along the same lines as the way that people are listening to it. And that is going to require a playback system and a compositional system that has integration. It's what we're already doing to a degree on Chew. It's streaming sets, it's streaming sessions where you're doing recording. It's all those things, and in order to incorporate DJs, they're going to have to be able to link that up into that ecosystem as well. So I think that they are working on that.
And I have great faith. I've used Native Instruments since the beginning. I mean, I love those guys. The only reason my Native Instruments products ever end up on Reverb is because they're just so CPU intensive, and because I get this feeling like I have all kinds of expansions. I have like 45 of them, and they're cool. But when I open an expansion kit in Machine and I hit play, I'm like, cool. So they kind of half wrote the bones of the song here. And I really kind of want to write my own. And like everything sounds good, but it's all very mastered, very like full. And to me, like I'm trying to learn how to produce. I'm trying to learn how to master. I'm trying to learn how to do all this stuff. And it's just not for me. I don't feel like I'm quite being as creative from
those
scratch.
Crutches out there screw up a lot of people's development, in my opinion. I mean, some people make the argument that, using loops, using those kind of tools, it's great. It's a learning tool. It's something you can do along the way. But what I find instead actually happens is people put it out as if they did it, and then they take on, I don't know if it's not an arrogance, but they take on an attitude that
they know how to make music.
I got this.
So there's
by numbers.
There's a video of Kink displaying that DJ 808. I know you've seen the video. He's playing a System 1 synthesizer next to it. It's pretty cool. He uses a loop in Serato that he recorded in Ableton, like an air loop, and he's mashing on the drums. And it's cool. It's like, wow, I want that stuff. But the little synth bebop piece that he plays on the System 1, it's like boom, 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 boom. It's a very distinct System 1 patch. And the pattern is the one that's in the synth when you buy it, right? There's a song that a buddy of mine, we were listening to music at his house, and it was on like Pandora, and it's some big new trancey, super cheesy club track. That fucking patch with that pattern is not, I kid you not, it's the main line on the song. And I was like, I stopped him and I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Can I just ask, how many times have you guys went menu diving through the presets in FM8 and been like, oh yeah, I've heard that song before.
That's
oh yeah,
on
I've heard
track.
That one too. Oh yeah, I've heard that one too. Okay,
well,
all right.
And
it's an amazing
synth,
fair, but man.
To be fair, the stuff that Machine is doing right now is cool. I'm testing out some of this new stuff, and obviously we're not allowed to talk about it. It's cool. It's cool stuff. It's also not necessarily for me. I was telling Dan, I would rather spend a whole bunch of time in Ableton recording strange stuff off of records and trying to morph those sounds into the things that I want them to be. But that's a personal experience. Not everybody needs that. It's the perfect example is, I mean, I've made a couple songs. They're not great, but they're mine. I made them from scratch, and I know that every sound came from something that you couldn't identify. And to me, that's cool. But like the DJS 1000 and the SP16, for me to figure out how to use them together, I just loaded like demo loop projects on both of them. I got lost for 4 hours and I had a blast. I learned nothing of music production. I played loops.
Yeah.
It was super cool. I had fun DJing these loops, but I made nothing of my own. And I was like, well, shit, I wasted my whole night triggering loops that somebody else made.
Well, it's about learning the gear. You're publishing it and putting it on Beatport.
Well, no, but I mean, but the point is, I could have been spending 6 hours making my own kits in the SP16 and making my own sequences.
Oh, I'm right there with you. That's what I do. My workflow goes from,
you know,
yeah, my workflow is that exact way. I write my own material, and I'm not adverse to using presets.
Sure.
This is, however, I almost want to put a pin in this for a future conversation because I feel like we can go an hour on this one.